So I want to talk about one concern I've had we've had two economists on the show, Stanford economist Roger Knoll and the person who wrote Soccernomics, probably the leading soccer economist in the world, Stefan Szymanski. And they're both, first of all, they seem to be a little bit concerned about the criteria, like having unrealistic levels for the criteria and trying to achieve standards through regulations and criteria rather than competition. And I hear a lot of dialogue about we need to get our house in order before we have promotion relegation. We need to get our house in order. We need to get the A League right before we have a second division. We need to get the clubs ready before we have a national second division. And Stefan Szymanski in particular was saying this is totally the wrong way around. A couple of quotes. First from Roger Knoll, he said, even if you had the best economists in Australia saying this is what you need to make a second division work, why would you make it a rule? If they can play in the higher division, let them. What's the harm? And then, of course, we had and Stefan Szymanski. I was expecting to ask about the AIS and government funding because I wanted to ask him about the importance of government funding.
Yeah.
And he actually said, no, promotion relegation is not a thing you get when you get a house in order. It is a thing to get your house in order. It is not a policy, it's the policy. So I'd recommend everyone to listen to that episode. Do we have things the wrong way around? Are we trying to wait for perfect conditions, get our house in order before we introduce things, rather than using promotion relegation and grassroots participation to...
Yeah. Look, interestingly, I've worked with lots of economists when I was at PwC. The one thing about economists is that they don't live in the real world. That's what economics does. It's a theory of best practice or sentiment. And I'm not being disrespectful to either of those colleagues, by the way. But the reality of where we are today, firstly on promotion and relegation, we've got a licensed system to the A-League clubs that doesn't provide for it until 2032. Is it around the Olympics Day? I think it's that sort of, it's still a few years away. So it just ain't going to happen earlier, right? You've got private, for better or for worse, we are in a system where the A-League clubs are owned by private interests who invest millions a year. And we need to respect the rules under which they entered the system. So we can't shortcut that and say promotion relegation is happening by royal fiat of FA, right? Like you don't change the rules halfway on a journey. So that's the biggest impediment, and it's just a legal reality, sadly. On the getting the house in order, it's not so much that we have to get the house in order to be perfect before we take a risk. This game needs to build its financial resilience and balance sheet. If you looked at our balance sheet as an organization, we don't have a lot in the buffer to take risks and be prepared for it. COVID tested all sports out on that. And we're looking now to build a strong balance sheet so we can be sustainable confidently. So we're less likely to take risks on new competitions and new initiatives unless we've thought it through and we can build it properly. So we're a bit more cautious. The AIS process, I think that was the biggest mistake the game's made in a long, long time. You talk to some former Socceroos and Heather herself from the Matildas, but you talk to the Brescianos, the Grellas, who went through the AIS. It was a high performance development institution that we stopped participating in. I mean, what a silly decision. That was great at the time, perhaps, I don't know. But now we're replicating through academies in the APL and in the MPL system, the SAPs and those sort of academies to try and build high performance elite training for the talented players. So I think there's a few things that we could have done differently, but where we are today, promotion relegation sounds it's a great dream. Not all countries and leagues have it. We've taken a model here that has locked in a stable period for license owners, and it's not just the license fees that they paid, but it's the millions that they invest each year or lose each year per club. You've got to respect the role that they're playing. So there'll come a time when market will bring those together. If the championships and the second tier is supported, successful, and the quality is right, the NPL clubs will come knocking on the door, I have no doubt, on issuing licenses because they'll want a piece of it. Like, it's in their interest to grow the game. So I think it'll happen. I've got more faith in real world economics than theoretical ones. But even if I did want to support your colleagues, we're just not able to do it at the moment. It's just not a model we can introduce next year and say we're going to do promotion relegation. We can't and we won't.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, challenge you a little bit on that as well, respectfully. So I don't have the exact details, but this has come up in the past, and there's a letter that was written by Football Australia back to FIFA, debunking that I think is 2034 license agreement that in fact that doesn't prevent promotion relegation. I'd also say it's it's in line with FIFA strategy to actually have promotion relegation, but beyond that, I could Google if I wanted to right off the top of my head, and you'd go back to the early 2000s where Frank Lowy and co were talking about this, and it's always, and the conversation we're having now feels like the conversation we had 20 years ago. What I fear is we're going to have the same conversation in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. It's always going to be this pipe dream. And even if it is to say, to use the 2034 year, even if it is to say, because it's only 9 years away, right, you know what? 2034 promotion and relegation, or at least start off with promotion at some point or sometime earlier. At least you're growing from the bottom up. So the strongest clubs are going up and you're actually growing the A-League. So at the moment, there is no 13th A-League club.
I agree.
So even if you start off with promotion.
Yeah.
The other point I'll make is, and this one actually, I think it's overstated this, that the franchises have invested, therefore we need to protect their investment. I would say every club has invested in football, whether it's the initial clubs that started the NSL in 1977, whether it was the clubs that joined the NSL afterwards, whether it was South Hobart, who started over 100 years ago. They've all invested in football well before many of these franchises ever existed. Yeah. And I don't think it's fair or right to say that just because somebody is now paid a license fee, and as part of that payment, they took a lot of IP that these other clubs invested in earlier. The 2006 Socceroos didn't just appear from the A-League. They were your Adelaide Cities, your Marconis, Sydney Uniteds, Melbourne Knights have produced those players. So everyone needs to be protected in the sense that the franchise should have no further protection. No one should have a right to not be relegated. I think everyone every club in Australia should have that opportunity to aspire to go into that position, and equally, no one should have a right to not have a trapdoor there at some point as well. So, I think Football Australia. I think we need to be very clear that set the year in place. This is it. We're working to it. No more protection. Open the market, and market forces will sort themselves out. I'm not an economist, but I've been around long enough to know market forces usually drive things.
I agree with you. Look, I agree with you on that. In terms of set it up as an agenda with a time frame. It's not something I can give on this program or as an individual anyway. And I haven't thought a lot about it in terms of timing. But I think we're now in a position with the APL and Football Australia, our focus on grassroots clubs and fans has never been stronger. And I'll come back to that when I talk about the registration system in a moment. and that's the APL as well. The fact that for many years, the APL clubs, being brand new, didn't have that natural connection with local clubs, and they were set up not to have, right? Let's not kid ourselves. That was why they were there. It takes time to reconnect those roots, and it probably takes generations, right? Which is good. So I think we're now in a better position to start having those conversations. And if I was at APL and I saw a strong second tier with clubs with good attendances, good success, I'd actually say our next 4 clubs who admit into the APL should come from that group. How good? But until we get this second tier up and running and successful, you're not going to do that. It won't be fair, right?
No, you're right.
And maybe that's the. So I think we're in that space. And just coming back to this focus on fans, we're having really strong discussions at the moment on the fact that in football, our biggest asset doesn't appear on our balance sheet. Our biggest asset are the participants and their families. 2 million participants. The numbers have exploded with the growth of women's football, but just more generally, the violence of the other codes has given our code a natural advantage, right? And it's growing even more so. What we're now doing through a consistent national registration system is that we will have the data on every one of these participants, not just fans who answer a website, but people who play in a club that is affiliated with the football system. We've got their details, their family's details, where they live, who they're interested in, what they're about. That data is incredibly valuable, not just financially, but as a coalition of dedicated football people. And whether it's us or the APL, to look into that data and say, how can we serve you better? How can we send you snippets of games, coaching tips, interviews with your favorite player? Build a digital platform. This game will secure value and commitment far beyond any other because we've got the numbers. And as we go down a digital world, my kids don't look at a newspaper, nor do they watch the clock news. So it doesn't have to be on free-to-air television to get interest. So that old broadcast model that's helped some sporting codes is going to go like that. The digital model, which relies on quantity of fans and participants, is going to go like that. And we've got the advantage. If we can get our acts together on that piece, we will all streak away from the competition, not just in Australia, but globally. And I think that the football conversations from FIFA, you would have seen a relationship that FIFA did with, was it DAZN on FIFA Plus access? This game will start to find its feet financially and in connection with its fans in a way that it's never been able to before because the platforms weren't there. The digital connection wasn't there. So a lot can happen in a short period of time. So I think your prayers might be answered, but maybe in a different sort of way.
So I want to circle back to the comment about soccer economists versus real economists.
Real people, not economists versus players in the market.
I have to admit that concerns me a bit. Like if I heard something similar, say about vaccine policy, or which kind of like was a bit dismissive about experts in the field, I'd be very deeply concerned about where the government is going. Like I'm a myself. There is value to literally spending all your time studying something. Have you spent time at Football Australia, like asking, look, we don't think it's work. We think in the real world it won't work in Australia for this period of time. Is there any information we're missing? Because they are generous with the time. They came on our show. They're willing to answer emails.
I hear you. And
I'm non-trivial data which they shared with me, which I didn't expect. I learned a lot from them. Are you sure there's nothing you're missing if you talk to them and say, these are the reasons we don't think it works? What does your model say? Is there anything we're missing?
Do you know what? I'm not sure that there's nothing we're missing, and I didn't want it to be perceived as dismissive in any way. Deep thinkers of the game deserve a seat at the table. I made that point with AAFC and a whole bunch of different voices. That's not. I didn't mean to be dismissive. I've been a bit flippant with economists, because some of my best friends are economists, and I say that to them all the time. Who's going to win the Melbourne Cup tomorrow? The economic theory, Macquarie Bank's put out their theory, but it's just that. No, what I was suggesting was that, and I'm really happy to speak with your colleagues, because they assess things from principles that are valid. I don't have an issue with that. The point I was making was that the reality of what we face, some of the variables that we need to negotiate around can't be assumed to not exist as they can in an economic theory. The current football economy we operate in is imperfect. And the club licensing is one example of that. You could say we shouldn't have it, and an economist might, and then they might hypothesize that you get a better answer, but we can't make that assumption. But notwithstanding, I'd love to get, and I'll get their details, because deep thinking is what we need, and we are not arrogant administrator of the game. That's foolish.
I will follow up on that, because I've been collecting basically what the case is for coming Australia. Because I'm a convert myself. I thought it wouldn't work in Australia unless you built things first, and it's actually the economics research.
And that's certainly where I am. That's where I am, but I'm happy to. I'm happy to listen to the alternate.
It was actually the economics research which made me realize, basically change my opinion.
Great.
Yeah. So that would be interesting. So it would be a long term, because academia always works really slowly, but we'll follow up on that. So actually, and then a second question on that. I agree. Yeah, the 2034, I don't understand the legal issues, and if that's a roadblock, I take your word for it. But stuff below that. So what would be best practice is my understanding of economics, and this is from a layman who's learning from economists, would be that you can never use criteria or regulation to be competition. You can use criteria to protect people, like say credit card fraud and stuff like that. But if you just went to clubs in Australia and said, anyone that wants to play on a national stage from second to however many tiers below, we'll let you do that. We'll organize you into leagues, and we'll let you find your actual level, and we'll just put in some criteria to make sure that you're not defrauding people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would, at least my understanding of economics literature, would achieve higher standards than setting criteria, which seem to be stuck there. It's hard to find enough clubs that the criteria you want anyway.
Yeah.
Have we considered maybe a more, I know it's a loaded term in the political world, but a bit more of a free market competition-based approach to try and build up leagues below the A-League? If, say, the A-Leagues, we can leave it as it is until 2030, can we do something like that?
Well, the second tier is the opportunity that a platform for a second tier competition is what we're trying to grow in that, to fill that gap. I think that's the probably natural answer. But on the leagues, on the APL itself, we just need to give them space to find their feet and their identity and their business model, and then those institutions, those owners, will be invested with getting more fans and more attendances and more competitive matches. So if picking up an NPL club that's doing well in a second tier, that's why we're doing it, to profile the fact that the jump is manageable, the standard is obviously comparable, and the financial sustainability. You're not going to inherit the Melbourne Knights or Marconi, and after 2 years they're gone broke. So that's it. There's no the thing about the APL model was that we created clubs that weren't there. So, like, from an economic point of view, it was a fiction. We interfered with the market fundamentally, and we've been reconciling it ever since. So we're never going to help. We're never going to get onto the same page as a pure economic theory, because the model's not pure.
Mhm.
But we tried the alternative model with the NSL. That didn't work either. So the commitment we have as board members of Football Australia, participants in this global sport that is the biggest in the world, we have to invest to make it grow. That's it. We have to. The top tier, the state leagues, the junior clubs, and we're addressing our minds at the moment to schools. We've let that go. Our biggest platform of kids playing the sport is actually at schools, and we're doing well. And we've not really enlisted those schools as a base for great football, for the football economy. Other codes, and I know that from the AFL time, the schools become their academies, and they do all their training for the clubs, particularly in Victoria, WA, South Australia. So we're looking at that. We're not fixated on particular models. We're not trying to keep NPL clubs out and only focus on A leagues. That's not our remit. Growth, investment, attracting more funding from government, and holding our end of the bargain to fans with this digital platform. That's on our agenda at the moment. It really is, and that's a full book. Plus, we've got 12 national teams that we're running. That's never happened in football before. And in some cases, I think it's the under 17s, they've got World Cups every year. It's a big economy that we need to keep rolling. So it's good fun. It's good fun.